It was a quiet evening, and I was driving home after a long day at the office. The highway was relatively empty, and the hum of the tires against the road was almost soothing. My thoughts drifted to my family. I couldn't wait to sit down with my wife and kids, hear about their day, and maybe catch the end of a basketball game on TV. As the head of internal affairs, my days were often packed with meetings and investigations. Holding officers accountable wasn't an easy job, but it was one I took seriously. My goal had always been to ensure fairness and integrity within the force. But tonight, I wasn't thinking about work. I was just looking forward to getting home. The flashing red and blue lights in my rearview mirror snapped me out of my thoughts. I frowned, confused. I had been driving within the speed limit, my car registration was up to date, and my taillights were working fine. There was no reason I could think of for being pulled over. Still, I signaled and pulled to the side of the road, keeping my hands on the steering wheel as I waited. The officer approached my car briskly, his flashlight already in hand. He tapped on my window, and I rolled it down slowly. "Good evening, officer," I said calmly, my voice steady despite the unease bubbling in my chest. He didn't respond right away, instead shining the flashlight directly into my face. "License and registration," he barked. I handed over my documents without argument, watching his face closely as he inspected them. His expression didn't soften. If anything, his frown deepened. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" he asked, his tone sharp. "No, sir, I don't," I replied honestly. "You were driving erratically," he claimed, though I knew it wasn't true. His words feel like a test, as though he was waiting for me to challenge him. "I don't believe I was," I said carefully. "But if you'd like, you can explain what you mean." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Are you giving me attitude?" "No, sir," I said evenly, keeping my hands visible on the steering wheel. The officer's demeanor grew more aggressive as the minutes ticked by. He began questioning me about where I was coming from, where I was going, and whether I had anything illegal in the car. "Step out of the vehicle," he demanded suddenly. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding. I had done nothing wrong, but I knew better than to resist. Slowly, I opened the door and stepped out, keeping my hands where he could see them. "Turn around and put your hands on the hood," he ordered. "May I ask why, officer?" I said, my voice steady but firm. "You're acting suspicious," he snapped. "Just do it." I complied, feeling the cold metal of the car hood beneath my hands. I heard the officer muttering under his breath as he began patting me down. The situation felt surreal. I was a senior officer, a man dedicated to justice and accountability, yet here I was, being treated like a criminal for no reason other than the color of my skin. Other cars whizzed by on the highway, some slowing down to gawk. The humiliation burned deep, but I stayed calm. I had dealt with officers like him before, arrogant, quick to assume, and unwilling to see the person in front of them as anything more than a stereotype. As he finished his unnecessary search, he stepped back and crossed his arms. "What do you do for a living?" he asked, his tone mocking. I looked him in the eye. "I work in law enforcement." The officer scoffed. "Law enforcement, huh? You don't look like law enforcement to me." I reached into my pocket slowly, making sure he could see every movement. "I'm going to show you my badge," I said, my voice calm but firm. When I pulled out the badge and held it up, his smirk faded. I saw the exact moment the realization hit him. He stared at the badge, his eyes flicking to my name and title. Head of Internal Affairs. His face went pale. I, uh, I didn't realize." "No, you didn't," I said, cutting him off. "You didn't bother to ask any real questions. You assumed. You profiled me, and you escalated the situation without cause." The officer stammered, struggling to find his words. "I was just, doing my job, sir." "No," I said firmly, my voice low but filled with authority. "Doing your job means treating everyone with respect, regardless of how they look or what you assume about them. You didn't do that tonight." He opened his mouth to argue but quickly closed it again. The confidence he had earlier was completely gone, replaced by a nervous, fidgeting demeanor. "You'll be hearing from me," I said. "I'll be filing a full report about this incident, and trust me when I say that I'll personally ensure this doesn't get swept under the rug." He nodded quickly, his hands trembling slightly. "Yes, sir. I apologize, sir." As I sat in my car for a few moments after the incident, staring at the dark stretch of highway ahead, I felt a mix of emotions coursing through me: anger, sadness, exhaustion, and determination. It wasn't the first time I'd experienced something like this, but tonight felt heavier somehow. Maybe because I knew how easily things could have gone differently if I weren't in a position of authority. I thought about all the people who don't have the advantage of pulling out a badge, who face harassment and profiling every day with no one to hold their harassers accountable. The weight of that reality sat heavily on my chest. As I continued driving home, the silence in the car was deafening, interrupted only by the rhythmic hum of the tires on the pavement. I kept replaying the officer's face in my mind, the shift from arrogance to fear when he realized who I was. His apology had been rushed and insincere, but it wasn't the apology that mattered. It was what came next. The truth is, change doesn't come from a single encounter. It comes from consistent effort, from calling out wrongdoing when it happens, and from creating systems that ensure accountability. That's why I took the job in internal affairs, to be the bridge between justice and reform, to make sure officers like him didn't continue to operate unchecked. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made up my mind. Tomorrow, I'd write the report detailing every aspect of the encounter. I'd follow through and ensure it reached the right hands. But more importantly, I'd push harder within my role to implement deeper training on bias and professionalism. When I walked into my home, my wife met me with a concerned look. She could tell something was off. "Rough day?" she asked gently, pulling me into a hug. I nodded, holding her tightly. "Yeah, but it reminded me why I do what I do." As my kids ran into the room, their laughter filling the space, I smiled despite the lingering tension in my chest. I wanted a better world for them. A world where they wouldn't have to question their safety or worth because of the color of their skin. The officer's actions that night weren't just a personal offense, they were a symptom of a larger problem. And while I couldn't fix it all in a day, I could make sure this moment wasn't wasted. Change might not happen overnight, but it would happen one step at a time, and I would be relentless in making sure of it.